A priest stands in a candlelit room in a private house in Paris. On the altar in front of him is not a cross, but a naked woman lying perfectly still. The priest raises a chalice over her body. An infant is brought into the room. What happens next is written down decades later by the Paris police in sworn testimony by the people who were in that room. The naked woman on the altar is not a prostitute. She is not a criminal. She is the most powerful mistress in the history of the French monarchy. She is sleeping with King Louis XIV. She has borne him 7 children. And she believes the ritual being performed on her body will keep him in love with her forever. Her name is Françoise-Athénaïs de Rochechouart de Mortemart. The court calls her Athénaïs. History calls her Madame de Montespan. And the scandal that nearly destroyed her was so catastrophic, so politically dangerous, that the King of France personally ordered every document related to it sealed, burned, or buried. Some of those documents were not found until the 19th century. To understand how she ended up on that altar, you have to understand where she began. She was born in 1640 into one of the oldest noble houses in France, the Mortemarts. Her family was known for 3 things: their ancient bloodline, their crushing debts, and what the court called l'esprit Mortemart, the Mortemart wit, a particular brand of cruel, elegant intelligence that made them terrifying at dinner and irresistible at court. Athénaïs had it more than anyone. She married young at 22 to the Marquis de Montespan, a man who was handsome, broke, and famously unstable. They had 2 children. The marriage was unhappy from the beginning. And then, in 1666, she was appointed maid of honor to the Queen of France. She walked into Versailles, and she saw the king. Louis XIV was 28 years old. He had already been King of France for 23 of them. He was at the height of his power, handsome, vain, obsessed with glory, and already bored of his current mistress, Louise de la Vallière. Athénaïs de Montespan was 26, married, witty past the point of cruelty, and unlike La Vallière, she was not interested in being quiet about any of it. She became the king's mistress in 1667, not secretly, not discreetly, openly. She was given apartments at Versailles that were larger than the queen's. She bore the king's 7 children, all of whom were legitimized. She was installed at the center of the court for 13 years, and during those 13 years, she did something no previous royal mistress in France had ever successfully done. She made the king love only her. She did it with beauty. She did it with the Mortemart wit. She did it with an instinct for cruelty that made her feared at court. She could destroy a reputation with a single sentence at dinner. Contemporary accounts describe her as terrifying, brilliant, impossible to unseat. But by 1674, she was 34 years old. She had given birth 7 times. Her body was changing. The king was 36, restless, and beginning to notice other women at court. And Athénaïs, who had built her entire existence around being the only woman he looked at, began to panic. This is where the private house in Paris comes in, because Athénaïs was not the only woman at Versailles who was panicking. All across the French court in the 1670s, women of the aristocracy were quietly making appointments to see a woman who lived on the Rue Beauregard in Paris. Her name was Catherine Voisin. The court called her La Voisin, and she could sell you anything. La Voisin was, on paper, a fortune teller. In practice, she ran an enterprise that French historians now describe as the largest organized poisoning network in early modern European history. She sold love potions. She sold abortions. She sold poisons. And for her most important clients, she arranged something else entirely. She arranged black masses. The ritual had a specific structure. It was performed by a defrocked Catholic priest named Abbé Guibourg, a real priest in full clerical robes who had been excommunicated for crimes the records still refuse to specify. Guibourg would conduct a parody of the Catholic Mass. The altar was a naked woman. The sacrifice, in the most serious version of the ritual, was an infant. The blood was collected in a chalice. The woman on the altar drank from it. And the prayer was always the same, that the man she loved would love her forever. Athénaïs de Montespan attended these masses. The historical debate is not whether she was there. The debate is how many times and how far it went. According to the sworn testimony of La Voisin's daughter, given under oath to the Paris police in 1680, Madame de Montespan attended black masses conducted by Guibourg at least 3 times. La Voisin's daughter described the altar. She described the chalice. She described the infant. And she named Athénaïs by name, the Marquise de Montespan, mistress en titre of the King of France, lying naked on the altar while a sacrificed infant's blood was poured over her. This is not speculation. This is the direct testimony of a woman whose mother was burned alive for these crimes. It is recorded in the files of the Chambre Ardente, the burning chamber, the special tribunal Louis XIV set up to investigate the scandal. Documents that he would later try to destroy. In 1677, a minor poisoning trial in Paris uncovered something the authorities were not expecting. The accused woman named names. She named other poisoners. Those poisoners named their clients. And the clients were not random Parisians. They were duchesses, countesses, maréchals, women who dined with the king. The investigation spiraled. By 1679, the Lieutenant General of Police, Nicolas de la Reynie, had a list of over 400 suspects, including 36 members of the highest French nobility. He arrested La Voisin. He arrested Guibourg. He arrested dozens of others. Under interrogation, and the interrogations were not gentle, La Voisin's network began to unravel. And the name that kept appearing in testimony after testimony was Madame de Montespan. La Reynie brought the evidence directly to the king. We know what was in those files because La Reynie kept a personal summary that was discovered centuries later. Montespan had allegedly paid for love potions to be slipped into the king's food for years. She had allegedly paid for black masses to keep his affection. And in 1679, when the king began an affair with a younger woman named Mademoiselle de Fontanges, Montespan had allegedly commissioned poisoned gloves and a poisoned chemise to murder her rival. Mademoiselle de Fontanges would later die suddenly at age 20 after a short, strange illness. The cause was never determined. Louis XIV read the files. He sat with the evidence that the woman he had spent 13 years with, who had borne him 7 children, had poisoned his food, conducted black masses on her naked body, and tried to murder his new mistress. And then he made a decision. He buried it. On the king's personal order, every piece of evidence relating to Madame de Montespan was removed from the official court records. The Chambre Ardente, which had been given the authority to investigate the highest nobility in France, was quietly shut down in 1682. La Voisin was burned alive in the Place de Grève in Paris in 1680. Guibourg was walled up in a dungeon and died there years later, unrecorded. 36 people were executed. Dozens more were exiled or imprisoned for life. And Madame de Montespan was never charged, never questioned, never publicly named. She was quietly removed from her official position. Her children with the king were still raised at court. She was given a pension and a residence. She lived for another 27 years, increasingly religious, increasingly withdrawn, and she died in 1707 at the age of 66. Every time a historian attempted to write about the affair of the poisons in the century after her death, the documents they needed had disappeared. What survived did so because Nicolas de la Reynie, the police lieutenant who ran the investigation, kept private copies of the files in his own home. After his death, the papers passed through several hands before being rediscovered in the 19th century in a private archive. That is how we know. Consider what the cover-up meant. A king ordered the highest criminal investigation in his kingdom to be shut down, evidence destroyed, and witnesses silenced. Not to protect a minister, not to protect a policy, but to protect the reputation of a woman he had already stopped loving. Because if it ever came out that the official mistress of Louis XIV had lain naked on an altar while a priest poured a sacrificed infant's blood over her body, it would not be her scandal. It would be his. Françoise-Athénaïs de Montespan is remembered today, when she is remembered at all, as a beautiful mistress of a famous king, a footnote to his reign, a name on a portrait. But the record that survived, the one the king could not destroy, tells a different story. She was not a footnote. For 13 years, she was the most powerful woman in France. And she did what powerful women throughout history have always done when they could feel their power slipping. She fought to keep it.